Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I know things are difficult at the moment given our circumstances, but let me know in the comments if you did anything nice for New Year's. Today's book is The Eternity Cure by Julie Kagawa, the second book of the Blood of Eden trilogy, which has a 4-star rating on Goodreads. If you haven't seen my review for The Immortal Rules, the first book of this trilogy, I will leave a link in the description. This is 446 pages and took me 4 days to finish reading. Alison Sekimoto died so that she might live. As a vampire, she faces the rise of a deadly new plague to her kind. Alison thought that immortality was forever. Now eternity itself hangs in the balance. The virus must be stopped, no matter what the cost, no matter what the sacrifice. Mankind's survival depends on us. The legend continues. Blood of Eden, Book 2. After reading The Immortal Rules, I was so excited to start reading this book. I need more Zeke and Ali moments. Similar to The Immortal Rules, The Eternity Cure consists of 3 parts, which are all made up of consecutive chapters: Hunter, Captive, and Ardent. From the first sentence, Chapter 1 really had me, and I realised that in the time between finishing The Immortal Rules and starting this book, part of me had missed Ali. I previously discussed the varying effectiveness of using short sentences in narrative. Chapter 1 begins with a short sentence, and there's no way that it won't demand the reader's attention. I loved it, and it immediately reminds the reader of Ali's current circumstances in terms of being a vampire. From the beginning of the novel, it's clear that during the time between the end of The Immortal Rules and the beginning of The Eternity Cure, Ali has completely come to terms with being a vampire, and she's owning who she is now. She knows who she is. A little further into the first chapter, it becomes clearer how Ali has changed. Throughout The Immortal Rules, being new to vampirism, Ali most definitely still has a sense of her humanity. As I started reading this book, I wasn't sure how much of that might be left. As a human, Ali despised vampires, and more so the vampires who thought they were above everyone else and treated human lives as if they were nothing more than cattle and disposable. During that book, this is what Kanan tries to explain to Ali. Due to the relationships Ali still had with humans, how she's portrayed to be at the beginning of this novel shocked me a little. Ali is far more like the vampires she despised than she used to be, and that makes me feel as though I don't quite know her now. And so I continued reading, almost in desperation of finding some part of the Ali that I met in The Immortal Rules. It's almost halfway through the first chapter before it's made clear where the plot is going at this point and what Ali's current goal is, which immediately reminded me of some of the events that took place at the end of The Immortal Rules. There is some kind of jump forward in regards to Ali's life between the ending of The Immortal Rules and the beginning of The Eternity Cure, and so I'm not going to lie, it was a slight relief to find out that Ali still has feelings for Zeke. Even though I don't know how long it's been since she saw him, I'm then reminded of how much I ship them. It's strange that throughout The Immortal Rules, I never felt an emotional connection or tie to Kanan, Ali's mentor. However, as I'm brought up to speed with what's happened since the ending of The Immortal Rules, I realised that I am actually quite worried for him and I'm anxious for his circumstances, which took me by surprise before I realised, well, he's important to Ali, so as the reader, I do care about him somewhat. At the moment, Kanan is not in a good place. Due to Kanan being Ali's sire, which is a vampire term, in short meaning that Kanan was the vampire who turned Ali, or more importantly, it was his blood that turned her. Ali is having visions of where Kanan currently is and what he's experiencing. That this keeps happening and Ali isn't in a position to help is agonising as the reader. I mentioned it when talking about the first book, but I'm going to address it again because I'm so glad that Julie Kagawa wrote it so accurately. After going through something that fundamentally changes you as a person, you never stop missing who you were. You don't stop grieving for your past self, and Ali, although painfully so, still reminisces about her past life. It's not long before it's clarified for the reader exactly how Ali currently feels about Zeke, and honestly, my heart ached for her. The fact that after everything she still has such strong feelings for him, I really felt for her, and I'm still somewhat hopeful for things working out between the both of them. I don't know how. Halfway through chapter 2, there's a climax plot point coming, and I noticed a similarity in the situation to 1 or 2 in the Immortal Rules. More than a few times, Julie Kagawa presents the reader with a situation where we usually know what the 2 or maybe 3 possible outcomes could be. One is usually much better than the other. However, we have no idea which outcome we're going to get until we read it. Well, this is one of those situations. It happens around halfway through chapter 2, and so I'm desperately hoping for one outcome over the latter. I also realise that it's 9:30 at this point, and accept that I have no idea what time I'm going to stop reading. I'm not going to go into details of the Immortal Rules. You can go and watch that review, but Ali has never really known a parental figure. Due to being a total vampire fiction nerd, I'm familiar with the concept of a sire, in terms of vampires and sire lines, but at this point, Ali refers to herself as Kanan's daughter, and oh my goodness, I just love her so much. I have so much love for Ali. Julie Kagawa is so good at creating suspense and putting the reader on edge, much to my discomfort whilst reading, but it also means that I'm almost constantly wanting to find out what's going to happen next. Every time I take a breath of relief, another situation arises where I'm on edge again. Oh my goodness, Julie Kagawa, the end of chapter 2. The reader is led to believe that Ali is about to find one of 2 people. I'm hoping with everything that I have that it's one of those people over the other. I just realised that I'm referring to them as people and not characters. If that doesn't tell you that you should read this book, then I don't know what will. Anyway, the person that Ali finds turns out to be neither of those, and is actually a character we met briefly in the Immortal Rules. I had been thinking I'll take a break at the end of this chapter, but given the person that Ali runs into, there was no way I was putting the book down at this point. So the reader is led to believe that one of 2 things are going to happen, and I felt devastated when a third outcome came to pass. However, once it's happened, it seems so obvious. It was only because I was so desperate for a particular outcome that presented with a situation where that outcome could be possible, I convinced myself that was what was going to happen. After about half an hour, I'm 3 chapters into this book, and as much as I've really missed Ali, I realise I've missed Julie Kagawa's writing, as in her style. Regardless of the tense and who the protagonist is, every author has a voice that they write with, and in the time between finishing the Immortal Rules and starting the Eternity Cure, I'd missed her writing. The first time I put the book down since I started reading was chapter 4, 54 pages in, simply because I was shattered and it had long gone 10 o'clock. Not that that stopped me before, but I couldn't wait to start reading again the next day. So I started reading chapter 4 and realised that I loved how throughout this series so far, there have been more than a few characters who'd I'd assumed to be minor characters, pretty much irrelevant to the plot, who have then returned again however many chapters later to play a different role in Ali's story. The slight villain redemption arc that takes place at the beginning of the Eternity Cure really did make me think, because I did entirely see this character as a villain, the relationship that Ali forms with this character is then constantly tense. Something else that I loved about this book was the varying chapter lengths. In some aspect, varying chapter lengths can be just as effective as varying sentence structure. I was in a position where I never knew where the chapter was going to end until I got there, which was something else that kept me on edge, as well as the signature cliffhanger chapter endings. Imagery is something I'm a huge fan of, as well as just descriptive writing, and some of the similes and metaphors in this book are great. It really creates the image in your mind. Partway through chapter 4, the character that Ali has been travelling with for a while now does something that finally earns my trust. Up to this point, they claimed to care about Ali, but I didn't fully believe them. Now, I do trust them a little more, but not unlike Ali, I'm still pretty wary of them. I previously mentioned how there are a few things that come close to my appreciation of a character's sarcasm and or sass in a book, and the character that Ali ends up spending some time with basically wins me over when he makes a really sarcastic comment that did make me smile. Oh my goodness, the end of chapter 4, which also marks the end of part 1, I love the plot twists in these books because once they've happened, they make so much sense. They're just things that, as the reader, you wouldn't have thought of or seen coming. The sentence that ends part 1 is written so dramatically, and I loved it. I couldn't wait to continue reading. Eventually, Ali returns to the vampire city that she'd left in the first book, and I love the nervousness and anxiety that she feels because it's realistic. Not only is this not a very nice place anyway, but revisiting a place where your life changed significantly forever after not having been there for a rather long time does a lot of things to you, and I felt that I could understand exactly how Ali was feeling at this moment. Wow. Chapter 5. I haven't seen this side of Ali before. I've mentioned that as a vampire, Ali still holds on to some of her humanity, but throughout these books we do get glimpses of the creature that she has the potential to become. The moments where Ali has just had enough and she doesn't have it in her to bury the vampire that she knows she is, it almost worried me slightly that I really liked who she became in those moments. It was nice to read her not having to deny or mask her true feelings and desires, even if those things made her into something she didn't really like, because I know what it's like to try and be someone you're not for the sake of other people. As much as I don't want her to be a monster, I so really just want her to be her and feel comfortable doing so. Oh my goodness, Zeke. Oh my goodness, Zeke. I only figured out it was Zeke halfway through the sentence before we're told that it's Zeke. So Ali, having accepted and embraced that she's a vampire, finds Zeke again, her current love interest, whom I ship her with, but who also believes that vampires are nothing other than pure evil, except from his brief romantic encounter with Ali however long ago. The circumstances under which Ali finds Zeke again are perfect, given her current goal and where the plot is going. All of these plot twists are brilliant because I never see them coming, but they all accelerate the plot and get me quite anxious and on edge, especially this one. Wow, okay. So it is clarified exactly how much time has passed between the ending of the Immortal Rules and the beginning of the Eternity Cure, and so I'm not expecting a passionately sweet reunion between Ali and Zeke. But I was rather annoyed at him the first time they meet again. I can understand that there's no way he's going to be too happy, given the company that Ali is currently keeping, but it's as if he's completely forgotten everything that's happened between them and only sees Ali for what she is in that moment. This frustrates me so much, because no matter what you would do to me or how you could make me feel, even if I know that I'm better off without you, that never means that I'm just going to forget or dismiss everything that's happened between us. I will always be grateful for what we did have and the role that you did play in my life. And so the openly hostile manner in which Zeke addresses Ali just winds me up so much, because I can't comprehend how someone could act that way in that situation or feel justified in doing so. Oh my goodness, I don't know if I'll ever get used to books toying with my heart like this. Zeke tells Ali why he is where he is, and my heart just ached. He still feels so strongly for Ali, but he doesn't want to, and I felt that. It was also frustrating to know exactly what it's like for Ali, just as you're coming to terms with losing someone who you know you're better off without, but that you still care about so much. They walk back into your life. The head or heart battle is excruciating, and I just want Ali to get a break. She deserves that at least. And to be honest, this is another example of taking normal problems that any one of us might experience and setting them against the fantastical background, although in this case it's the rather dark background of a world where people struggle to survive under the rule of vampires. Speaking of backgrounds, it was halfway through chapter 8 that I realised since the beginning of the Immortal Rules there hadn't been one setting, at least for me, that hadn't been completely clear and vivid in my mind. I feel as though Julie Kagawa's descriptive writing is the perfect balance between telling the reader what something is and allowing the reader's imagination to come up with the rest. By the end of chapter 9, Ali and Zeke have pretty much established where they stand with each other, although it's blatantly clear that they haven't been honest about how they actually feel about each other. As the reader, I know that Ali still has feelings for Zeke, and I fully believe that Zeke still has feelings for Ali, as much as he's in denial. It's at this point that I realise one of the themes throughout these books is most definitely loving, or at least caring about, someone you not only know you can't be with, but that you also know is not good for you. I could relate to that, and it shocked me somewhat how many of Ali's dilemmas I felt I could empathise with, whether in context or not. I've mentioned before in other reviews that stripped down and taken out of context, a lot of books come back to the same thing. There is most definitely a Romeo and Juliet vibe going on here, so of course I'm a fan. Obviously, at this point, almost halfway through the Eternity Cure, I've been completely absorbed in the romantic history between Ali and Zeke. Things are extremely sensitive at the moment, to put it one way. Ali ends up tending to Zeke's wounds with bandages, etc., and the tension between them both is almost unbearable. They both just love each other, like, admit it. Not long after I came to this conclusion, Ali and Zeke have the chance to have their first heart-to-heart since meeting each other again. Zeke basically says that he wants to start over with Ali, and as much as my heart jumped at the thought of them being together again, I wasn't really sure about how I felt this scene played out, more importantly, how Zeke acted and how he carried himself around Ali. A moment after this conversation, Zeke says that as much as he might hate vampires, he doesn't hate Ali, and I had to stop myself from freaking out and having a fanboy moment as Mum was sat across from me. Ali always refers to the night that she became a vampire as the night that she died, and that just did something to me. Obviously, in becoming a vampire, Ali actually did die, but I can completely understand where she's coming from in terms of experiencing something that completely changes you as a person. The person you were before that life-changing event is gone, dead. And as Ali does, you have to make time to grieve for your past self. You have to grieve for your past life and the person you will never be again. So when Ali revisits the vampire city she grew up in as a human, this time as a completely different person to who she was then, that really hit home, and I knew exactly how she felt. And the sense of deja vu in terms of I felt this before was remotely unsettling. The closer we get to what I feel is going to be the climax of this plot, the more anxious and nervous I'm getting, and I have to make sure that I'm actually reading and not just skimming through the words. Oh my goodness, the very end of chapter 10. Plot twist? No way. I've mentioned already how minor characters in these books somehow make a habit of making a significant return. The character who returns from Ali's past returns with new status and meaning, and this is another reminder of what happens when you're fundamentally changed as a person. Somehow you expect your relationships to be the same when you return to them, but when you've completed the journey that changed you, very few of the people you had close relationships with, no matter how strong, are still the same people. It still shocks me at this point how many of the repercussions of Ali becoming a vampire are fact that I could relate to, out of context, of course. Wow, Zeke and Ali's relationship, if you can call it that, only ever seems to get more complicated. I still ship them so much, but I'm aware that it's going to be pretty much impossible for them to be together. But given the plot twists in this series, part of me is hoping that maybe one will work out in my favour, or well, their favour. And then, oh my goodness, the end of chapter 11, I can't deal. I just can't. Every time that things are looking up and the plot seems to be coming to a gradual slow, boom, bombshell. Julie Kagawa, wow. Are there any minor characters in this series? Because they all seem to make a return and turn out to be someone other or someone more than who I believed them to be when they were first introduced. Oh my goodness. So, I'm reading chapter 12. I still know what I want to happen, but I now officially have no idea where these books are going. Things seem to be changing all the time, and I just want to know what's going on. Well, I know what's going on, I just don't understand why it's happening. Okay, so after everything, I would be able to understand Zeke giving up on Ali, or rather giving up on him and Ali. But when after everything that's happened to them, happened to each of them and happened between them, Zeke says, Ali, I'm not leaving you, I can just about take this. Also, with 200 pages left at 6:45, I'm not ruling out the idea of being able to have finished this book in just over 24 hours. You're important to me. I am so relieved at this point to be under the impression that Ali and Zeke's complicated relationship has returned, perhaps stronger than before. The end of chapter 13. Wow. It's clear to me at this point that creating suspense and tension is clearly one of Julie Kagawa's strengths. I almost felt sick due to how on edge I was, and the sense of relief when this scene seemed to freeze was so appreciated. Starting chapter 14, I didn't quite know what to think. I haven't really been given time to process the dramatic turn of events that's just happened, but then again, neither has Ali, so I have to keep reading. I love that even though Zeke knows Ali is a vampire and that she can heal from almost anything, and that she should be worrying about him, it's still so obvious how much he cares about her and worries for her. Wow. The end of chapter 14. Wow. This book addresses losing friends so accurately, and I feel that I can relate to Ali so much. In becoming a vampire, Ali has changed a lot in regards to the person that she is. People from her past think that they can come to her and talk to her as they did before she was a vampire, treating her as they had done previously because they've grown too, ignorant and selfish. But the version of yourself that put up with that and being treated like that is dead. In this case, that was the human version of Ali. It winds me up so much that her ex-friends are so shocked that she actually sticks up for herself and defends herself, because now she knows her worth. The accuracy of some of the events that are written in these books, based on my own experiences, just make me think Julie Kagawa must have been through some stuff, to put it one way, because I can't believe that you can write certain things with such accuracy without having lived them, or consulting someone who has. Partway through chapter 15, I do start to get slightly annoyed at how often I'm given the opportunity to get my hopes up in regards to a particular situation, only to be left devastated again when it doesn't end how I feel I was led to believe it would. This is something that happens constantly, I feel, throughout this series, so if you want to read cliffhangers and plot twists and get your heart torn at the same time, these books are for you. Later in this chapter, I just thought, Zeke, man, just Zeke. Obviously, I'm a soppy romantic, and so I appreciate Zeke and his actions so much, but I do not want him to get hurt. Julie Kagawa, if by any chance you see this, both eyes open. It took everything in me not to burst out crying. I love them both so much. I reached chapter 15, which is the last chapter before the last part of the book, Ardent, and so the last thing I'm expecting at this point is a plot twist this significant. It doesn't affect the plot directly, but it's a piece of information that changes a lot of things. And wow, the ending of part 2 is pretty climactic. I love that throughout reading this, I simply grow to love Ali more and more, even if that's the human that I know her to be, and knowing that she's constantly at war with her vampire self. But Julie Kagawa very carefully gives us small doses just to remind the reader what Ali actually is and what she's capable of. Zeke and Ali, I ship them so much. The way that they show they care about each other usually would make me melt. However, I next to never have the chance to do this, as those scenes are usually closely followed by some climactic holding my breath whilst panicking scene. On that subject, battle couples. Ali and Zeke are the perfect battle couple, and Julie Kagawa writes these scenes perfectly. I haven't shipped a battle couple this much probably since Divergent. Chapter 17. Really? Wow. At this point in the novel, that is literally the last way I need a chapter to start. However, at the end of that chapter, I realised just how invested I am in Zeke and Ali's relationship, which also gives me the ominous feeling that at some point that's going to take a turn for the worst. The end of chapter 18. Kanin. Wow. Well, that was a character arc and a half. I also felt rather stupid that it took until halfway through chapter 19 before the title of this book made so much sense to me. Then, oh my goodness, plot twist. There are hardly any chapters in these books that don't have cliffhanger endings, but I love that everything continually comes full circle. No part of the plot is ever discarded. Wow, Saren is actually crazy. I don't want to give away any of the plot, but this really reminded me of dystopian future films where... no, I don't want to give anything away. Oh my goodness, halfway through chapter 20, I had the biggest, most ridiculous gasp. I did not expect that, but I loved it. But I'm now even more anxious, not previously having thought that was possible. The whole situation comes to a rather quick diffusion. I found it somewhat amusing. Well, it gave me butterflies, that obviously at this point, Zeke and Ali are romantically involved, but the status of their relationship has never really been spoken about between them. Another character refers to Ali as Zeke's girlfriend, and I just felt like everything froze for a moment. Oh my goodness. Just short of 10 o'clock, I reached chapter 21, the penultimate chapter, and realised that I am most definitely finishing this book tonight. Chapter 21 has me absolutely ecstatic, but being this happy, this close to the end of the book, also has me slightly wary, and oh my goodness, Zeke is so a soppy romantic. I love that he's such a gentleman when it comes to being with Ali. The anticlimax at the end of this chapter completely messed with me. When I realised what had actually happened, I managed to laugh it off, but so not funny. Chapter 22. Really? I'm fuming at this point. I'd actually convinced myself that this was all going to end well, but now I am furious with the turn of events. So I managed not to cry, although I was on the verge of tears. The ending of The Eternity Cure has me absolutely seething. My only hope now is the epilogue and to continue reading the series the next day. At the end of the book, I was absolutely fuming. In the final lines, that anger dissolved into pure relief. I finished reading at 20 to 11 and figured I needed to get some sleep in order to start reading the Forever Song as soon as I could. Obviously they're a part of the same series, but I don't really feel as though I can compare the Immortal Rules and the Eternity Cure because the plots are so different. The reader has completely different feelings about the characters in each, and circumstances do change dramatically. I cannot explain how excited I am to start reading the Forever Song. Everything that I mentioned about the Immortal Rules still stands in this novel, in terms of the context and literature. I'd say that the romance plot is highlighted far more in this novel than in the Immortal Rules, but to a certain extent you might expect it to be, because as the reader, you know these characters now. I mentioned a few times when I spoke about the Immortal Rules, Julie Kagawa's ability to create such suspense, and that is magnified at least 10 times over in this book. I absolutely loved this read. It does end on such a cliffhanger, and I will be reading the Forever Song as soon as I can. Until then, like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, stay safe, and happy reading, guys.